Appearance on Dion's Daily Dose does not imply endorsement from or by any candidate or guest. The views, thoughts, and opinions expressed by Dion Bergeron or Dion's Daily Dose are his own and do not represent the views, thoughts, and opinions of any guest. Material and information presented is for general information purposes only. The Dion's Daily Dose name in all forms and abbreviations are the property of its owners, and its use does not imply endorsement of or opposition to any specific organization, product, or service. If you'd like to support the show, please visit our Patreon at patreon.com/Dion's Daily Dose.
All right. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I hope you're having a fantastic weekend. I know I am. It's a little hot for me here, like 90-something degrees. But other than that, I'm Dion.
And I'm Shawn.
Yeah. And tonight we're going to talk about the Supreme Court case. The Supreme Court, but the Senate argument about whether the Supreme Court should have ethics. Well, they want to impose a set of ethics.
Ethic requirements.
Ethic requirements. And we're going to break down the arguments and the video and show you guys what they had to say without you having to watch a long time of it. The whole thing. How long is it? Over an hour? Yeah. So we got the timestamps.
And the first one is Senator Durbin from Illinois.
Dick Durbin from Illinois at 11:24. You guys can find this. Where is this at?
It's Forbes Breaking
right?
News, yes.
Yeah, Forbes Breaking News.
On YouTube.
Durbin leads attempt to pass Supreme Court Ethics, Recusal, and Transparency Act is blocked by GOP. That's the name of the video. If you guys want to look it up. 11:24 is our first timestamp. All right, here we go. Should be good there.
Story after story about ethical misconduct by sitting Supreme Court justices has led the news for months. For decades, however, Justice Clarence Thomas has accepted lavish gifts and luxury trips from a gaggle of fawning billionaires. The total dollar value of these gifts is in the millions. One Supreme Court justice, millions of dollars worth of gifts. Justice Alito, as well, went on a luxury fishing trip that should have cost him over $100,000. But it didn't cost him a dime because the trip was funded by a billionaire and organized by right-wing kingpin Leonard Leo. Both Justice Thomas and Justice Alito have failed to disclose gifts they have accepted in clear violation of financial disclosure requirements under federal law. But it isn't only this shameless conduct that has cast a dark shadow over the court. Time and again, these justices' actions have cast doubt on their impartiality in cases before the court.
Because I'm going to pause it real quick because that's what this is really about. And the Democrats do a very, very poor job of hiding their real motivations. This is about them disagreeing with the way these justices rule. Interestingly enough, and at the end of this video, we'll show you guys some of the other contributions received by other judges that they, of course, they don't mention.
No.
$800,000 for a book deal for Ketanji, etc. There's a lot. Of course, the Democrats don't mention the lefty gifts and potential violations. They've got a real like narrow vision specifically for Clarence Thomas. But
the first one they always complain about.
Oh yeah. Thomas is always the first one they bring up. Here we go.
Last summer, Justice Alito set for an interview conducted in part by an attorney with a case before the court. In that interview, Justice Alito went so far as to publicly state that Congress has no authority to regulate the Supreme Court.
That's true.
By doing so, he made it clear that he'd already reached a conclusion about the constitutionality of legislation that Congress was considering on the issue. Legislation that will be before this body today and that could someday come before the court. More recently, we learned that the flags that were associated with the January 6th insurrection and far right were displayed outside Justice Alito's home. This happened even as the court considered cases related to the 2020 presidential election and the insurrectionist attack on the United States Capitol. Justice Thomas also continues to hear cases related to January 6 attacks, despite his wife's involvement with efforts to overturn the 2020 election. For years, Justice Thomas served as a fundraising draw at the Koch.
He can't even speak. But one of the things I find interesting, so they keep bringing up Alito's wife, right? And I've said before in a previous video, good luck with telling your wife she can't fly a flag. I know in my household, like I can impose my will upon my wife in various ways, but you pick your battles, man. You pick your battles. And that's not that's not the hill I want to die on. No, you can't fly that flag. Yeah, right.
And the flag's not that big of a deal.
It's really not. But here's the important part, right? Democrats have consistently said that it doesn't matter what the spouses do or involved in, right? Remember, Fauci's wife was part of the FDA that regulated various medicines, right?
I did not know that.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. But Democrats claim that doesn't matter. There's no conflict there. There's no problem there. There's no issue there because the spouse is a separate individual. You can't have it both ways. Either the spouse, is directly connected and you should be held accountable for the things they do or say, or they're not. So pay attention. Watch The Wives. Yeah, you should check out.
Yeah, I will.
Yeah.
Political Network's annual events. This is the same network that bankrolled another case currently before the court. Federal law requires the disqualification of a Supreme Court justice in any proceeding in which the justice's impartiality might reasonably be questioned. And the Supreme Court's own code of conduct reiterates that justices should disqualify themselves in cases where there is reasonable doubt about their impartiality. But despite serious questions about the impartiality of Justice Alito and Justice Thomas in numerous cases, they have refused to recuse themselves from these cases. The ethics crisis at the Supreme Court, the highest court in the land, is unacceptable. It is unsustainable, and it's unworthy of the highest court in the land. Our faith in the character and impartiality of our judges is essential to the functioning of our legal system and our constitutional form of government. But that faith requires judges, especially Supreme Court justices, to conduct themselves in a way that inspires public confidence. The justices should serve as models for every other judge in America. Instead, they are serving as prime examples for why a binding code of conduct is desperately needed for the Supreme Court. The ethics crisis at the court stems in large part from the fact that 9 justices on the court are the only federal officials not bound by an enforceable code of conduct. The only federal officials not bound by an enforceable code of conduct. More than 12 years ago, I first asked Chief Justice Roberts to adopt a binding code of conduct for all Supreme Court justices. In November of last year, for the first time in its 235-year history, the Supreme Court adopted an ineffective code of conduct for its justices. But the new code does not reform the court's ethics rules in any meaningful way and does not include an enforcement mechanism to address violations of the code. As the court conceded in the statement accompanying the code of conduct's release, it said, quote, "The code largely represents a codification of principles that have long regarded as governing our conduct." In other words,
I want to pause it just real quick because the Democrats have been crying about this for a while now. I think it was in 2022. I just looked up the article. The Supreme Court reformed their code of ethics and they released it. And of course, the Democrats' initial reaction was, no, this is horrible because conservatives have a majority. If lefties have a majority, they'd have been perfectly okay with it. Because everything's politicized now.
The so-called new code did not raise the ethical standards to which the justices would be held. It simply tried to paper over the failed practices of the past. The court can address these issues itself. The court could have issued a stronger code of conduct in the first place. It could revise its own code of conduct today. But Chief Justice Roberts repeatedly refuses to to use his authority and power to implement a binding code of conduct for the Supreme Court. Until he does, Congress will continue our legislative efforts. Last year, the Judiciary Committee, which I chair, reported to the Senate floor the Supreme Court Ethics, Recusal, and Transparency Act. The bill, which was led by Senator Whitehouse, who is on the floor, and which I am co-sponsoring, would require the Supreme Court to adopt an enforceable code of conduct and add new recusal and transparency requirements binding on the justices. It would be a real code of conduct. Importantly, this legislation's ethical and recusal requirements would apply to equally every justice on the Supreme Court, regardless of the party of the president who appointed them. This should not be a partisan issue. An enforceable code of conduct would be a good thing for the court and for our country. It is essential to ensuring the American people have confidence in the ethical conduct of the Supreme Court, and it's essential to restoring the court's reputation. The highest court in the land should not and cannot have the lowest ethical standards. That is why I support this legislation and why I urge my colleagues to join me. And Madam President, notwithstanding Rule 22, and as if in legislative session, I ask unanimous consent.
Okay, we're gonna pause it real quick.
Okay.
He's about to ask for unanimous consent. Basically, they don't need to debate it. Everybody goes yay, and it automatically passes. It's like an expedited process.
Yeah.
That's what he's about to do. But here's the real question, right? Oh, see, so Ben says Senator Durbin's wife was an Illinois lobbyist.
Yep.
So either the wives don't matter or they do.
Mm-hmm.
If they do, then we need to start really paying attention to who these people are married to. All of the people in our government. That's just me. Here's the question, right? If the Supreme Court is basically enforced their code of ethics by Congress, then Congress controls the Supreme Court.
For the most part, yeah.
For the most part. Really, it comes down to, should the Supreme Court have the power to regulate ethics in Congress?
That's a good question. It's supposed to be equal.
It's supposed to be equal. All three branches separate, but equal. And if you allow Congress to set any parameters over another branch, Congress has the power. And of course, that's what they want, because they can stack Congress.
Yeah.
But here he is asking for unanimous
They're going to try to stack the Supreme Court, too.
Yeah. Yeah. Here he is asking for unanimous consent.
Consent. The Senate proceed to immediate consideration. And as if in legislative session, I ask unanimous consent. The Senate proceed to immediate consideration of calendar number 199, S359, Supreme Court Ethics, Recusal, and Transparency Act of 2023. I further ask that the committee report substitute amendment be agreed to, the bill as amended be considered read a third time and passed, and that the motion to reconsider be considered made and laid upon the table with no intervening action or debate.
Is there an objection?
Madam President,
Senator from South Carolina.
reserving the right to object.
Lindsey Graham.
Let's be clear. This is
Before I play him, I just want to say, I do believe that there should be ethics
There should be.
for SCOTUS and other judges. But if you allow Congress to set those ethics, then you give Congress power over the Supreme Court.
And
It's
John
just not
Roberts
something-
should be the one to be in control of.
Right. I mean, SCOTUS sets their own ethics. And here's the big problem, right? So it's not just about the ethics, but they're talking about, and Recusal Act.
Yeah.
Right? So bear in mind that to the Democrats, anyone who likes Trump should not be able to rule on anything January 6th related.
Yeah, they want to create a committee, you'll hear in the video, where the committee decides if the Supreme Court justice should recuse himself. And that's crazy.
Yeah.
It's always been up to the individual.
Yeah. And again, these idiots believe that because Alito's wife, flew a particular flag outside her home, that he can't possibly rule on anything January 6th related. Because Clarence Thomas's wife sent some pretty salacious, wild texts that he can't possibly be impartial on the rulings. It's nonsense. It's absolute nonsense. All right, we get to listen to Lindsey Graham.
Yep.
Yay.
Is not about improving the court. This is about undermining the court. We have three branches of government here. We got the legislative, executive, and judicial branch. This would be an unconstitutional overreach. This would undermine the court's ability to operate effectively. And it's been a continued effort by our friends on the Democratic side to undermine a court they don't like.
True.
Here's what the Supreme Court has done. In April of 2023, all 9 justices signed a statement on ethics, principles, and practices specifying the ethics, principles, and practices they follow. In March 2023, the Committee on Financial Disclosures formally amended the personal hospitality regulations in a manner that now requires more complete disclosure. In November of 2023, all 9 justices promulgated a code of conduct. The court is taking these problems seriously. The question is, what are we up to here? We're trying not to empower the court or reform the court. We're trying to attack it right at the end of a term.
Yeah.
I remember very well when the majority leader, Senator Schumer, went to the court and said, right in front of the court itself, I want to tell you, Gorsuch, I want to tell you, Kavanaugh, you have released the whirlwind and you will pay the price. You won't know what hit you. And if you go forward with these awful decisions, it's really about the way the court decides cases that our colleagues on the other side really don't like. So all I would say is that there are provisions in this bill that should bother anybody that cares about an independent judiciary. Judicial investigative panels in Section 2 of this bill are made up of lower court judges who would actually preside over their bosses. There is one Supreme Court here. This is unnerving to have a group of lower court judges basically having an investigative panel, the ability to investigate the Supreme Court, the constitutionally designated Supreme Court.
Yeah, just the thought of a lower court comprised of judges that Congress sets, right? Look at some of the people that are in charge right now. Really consider DHS, FBI, CIA. Look at the people that they have put in charge of these and imagine the runaway power of a group of people that can regulate the behavior of the Supreme Court. It's a terrifying thought. And thankfully, the GOP was able to stop this time.
Recusal. That's been up to the individual justices since the court's founding. This bill would create a panel of judges to decide when a Supreme Court justice should be recused. Again, that just puts the court in, I think, disarray and fundamentally assaults the one Supreme Court we have. All I can say is that Section 7, where you have to have disclosures of amicus briefs, would make it very hard for certain people to register their opinions about a particular matter before the court because they could get destroyed by the media. They could get destroyed by special interest groups. And I think that chills out the ability for people to petition the court apart from politics. So my hope is that not only will we stop this exercise now, we'll stop it forever. With that said, I withhold my objection at this time.
Okay. So he makes some really good points. Not a huge fan of his, but
I'm not either, but
he has come in clutch before. In this particular instance, he's making some really good points. As we've said, it's a separate branch of government, supposed to be equal. How can it be equal if you're establishing basically rules and regulations for this court? And the idea of a group of appointed judges, I mean, really, Really? I mean, look at what's his name that wanted that was going to go on the Supreme Court, but they stopped.
Oh, you're
it.
talking about he's the Attorney General, Merrick Garland.
Garland. Yeah, look at Garland. Imagine Garland on that committee. Imagine Ketanji Brown on that committee.
Yeah.
Imagine
Somebody from the Ninth Circuit.
yeah,
There's a lot of.
Yeah, they could do a lot of damage to SCOTUS. All right, so our next little clip is 2711 to 3046, I think, and that is Senator Corrin
From Texas.
from Texas. Republican from Texas, 2711. Once again, Corrin from Texas.
Madam President.
Senator from Texas.
Madam President, reserving the right to object, I just want to briefly summarize the arguments that my able colleagues on this side of the aisle have made.
Okay.
An independent judiciary are the crown jewels of our democracy. And what do I mean by that? We have the political branches of government. We've got the White House, popularly elected president through the Electoral College. We've got individual senators elected by the various states. And then we've got the House of Representatives. Those are all political bodies.
True.
Yep. Oh, yeah, it went out. It'll come back.
Oh,
I forgot
okay.
to warn you.
It's okay.
It'll come back.
Everything's all right. There we go.
The judiciary,
I'm not sure
created by the Constitution, Supreme Court specifically, was designed to be a check on the abuses of power by the political branches of government and to hold up the Constitution as a supreme law of the land. That was Marbury versus Madison by Chief Justice Marshall in 1804, I believe. So
and that's the same case that the precedent was set that any law that is repugnant to the Constitution is null and void. Marbury v. Madison. Very, very, very crucial case.
Uh-huh.
Constitution is a supreme law of the land. It's not the political branches.
Right.
And I think in recent years, we have seen every institution in Washington, D.C. corrupted in one way or the other by the politicalization of previously revered institutions. And I'm talking specifically about the FBI and the use of a opposition research by a presidential candidate against a successful presidential candidate, President Trump. And then the FBI director say his mission in life was to see a special counsel appointed, which it was for 2 years, Robert Mueller, who found no basis upon which to bring any charges.
Right. And that was, dude, that was the biggest nothing burger I have ever seen in my life.
Yeah.
Do you remember how rabid these people were for the Mueller report?
Yep.
All night after night after night. What's her name? The crazy one on MSDNC, Rachel Madcow. She would go nuts, man, like drooling. Oh, we got him now. We got him now.
How many times have we heard that
Oh my God, dude.
on different
Unfortunately, the American people feel like there's a two-tiered system of justice in this country.
Mhm.
Mhm.
And that justice system, which has been the crown jewel of our system, has been corrupted by politics. And now our colleagues want to use that same corruption by politics of the independent judiciary and the Supreme Court of the United States. That may not be their intention. Maybe it is. They want the Supreme Court to become subservient to the Congress, which is anathema to the constitutional order created by the framers. This effort lays bare an effort by our Democratic colleagues to control an entire branch of government. There's been bills filed by the senator from Massachusetts and others to pack the Supreme Court.
Yep.
Fortunately, they haven't gone anywhere. But as our colleague knows, this is, and admitted yesterday, the chairman of the Judiciary Committee, this is nothing but a political exercise, and it needs to end now. For these reasons, I would oppose this legislation. And
I mean, that was an excellent summary.
Yeah.
It really was.
He's not my favorite person, but he made good points.
Right. He did make some really good points. And he brought up the fact that these people have been trying to pack the Supreme Court for a long time now. They want that control. They desperately want to be able to pass as many overreaching laws, because that's what they're about. They're about big government. They're about controlling the individual through government.
Yep.
They want to be able to just flood the court with a bunch of left-wing nut jobs so that they can rule that the Second Amendment doesn't apply to anything but the National Guard. They've said this. They're out of their minds, but that's their belief, and they have no problem imposing that upon other people. This cannot be allowed to happen. So the next one we have for you is Stolen Valor himself, Blumenthal from Connecticut. If you guys weren't aware, this is a guy who has repeatedly said he served in Vietnam with distinction. Yeah, and he did not.
I'm just trying to get the other side's argument.
I got it. I just want to make people aware of, where this is coming from. Such a quality individual. I appreciate that. Let's give a shout out for Shawn, because he does do a phenomenal job of presenting information from both sides, and sometimes it's difficult for me to stomach, but it's necessary so that we can understand and have a clear a clear vision of the statements from both sides. What do they mean? So here we go. Here's again. What's his first name? Blumenthal. Richard. Yeah. So that's why I thought Dick Durbin was him, because Dick.
Yeah, it's Richard Durbin.
Yeah, Dick Blumenthal. Mr. Stolen Valor himself. 4303 to 5010.
And I think this is the last speaker.
Last one.
Second, I want to thank my colleagues, Senator Durbin and Senator Whitehouse. I've been proud to be part of their team working for the most minimal kind of ethical standards for the highest court in the land. Right now, that court has no enforceable code of conduct, unlike any other court in the federal system, unlike any other branch of government. It is so elemental as a matter of simple ethical conduct and appearance.
So, interestingly enough, right, he fails to mention that Congress doesn't have oversight from the executive branch or the judicial branch. The White House doesn't have oversight from Congress or the judicial branch. They counteract one another. It's a balance of power, separate but equal. But they fail to mention that, of course.
The Supreme Court has squandered its almost mystical authority.
What?
Its unique power.
It's politicians that are ruining the Supreme Court's reputation.
Yeah, and I would argue that of the institutions, the only one with a scrap of respect left is the Supreme Court.
The deep state hasn't been able to infiltrate it very well.
Yeah, well, they've got their tendrils, but they don't control it.
No.
Not fully. This would allow them to control it. This right here.
In the federal government. In a sense, that power was not envisioned by the founders. The idea of judicial review came after the Constitution was written.
Yeah, so basically the founders were idiots.
Yep.
In his
mind.
Yeah, in his mind. They couldn't possibly have foreseen all the things that are now, common practice, like judicial reform, or the fact that our country has been infiltrated by communists and Marxists. But interestingly enough, they did indeed foresee all of this.
Yeah.
It's well documented in the Federalist Papers and other locations. They knew exactly what they were doing by making each branch separate but equal.
Yep.
We can thank Justice Marshall for that idea that the Supreme Court can literally strike down what we do here.
Yep.
It's the most powerful
It really bugs the hell out of them, doesn't it? Look,
it does.
branch of government, not the least dangerous, but the most powerful.
According to him.
And think of it for a moment.
Yeah, I guess in his
In
mind.
a democratic republic, it's unelected. It has life tenure. Nobody can tell a justice, you're too old to do this stuff anymore.
There's a point to that.
It is the most anti-democratic or undemocratic
It's not supposed to be
institution in a democratic system of government. Then
They keep saying this, right? They keep, oh, democratic this and, democracy that. We're not a democratic republic.
No.
We are a constitutional republic, a representative republic. There's a very, very, very clear distinction and an important distinction between that and a democracy.
The founders took different parts like of the democracy and a republic.
Right. There were
We
aspects
are
of that.
partly a democracy.
Yeah, it technically falls under the umbrella of governments considered democracies. But in the Constitution, it specifically states a Republican form of government. Why? Because that's a representative form of government. It's very republic. Yeah. Like, I think one of the earliest examples of the republic was the Roman Empire, right? It had its flaws.
Yep.
Which is why the founders set it up the way that they did with the 3 equal branches. But of course, the Democrats, that blows their mind that the things that they do could potentially be unconstitutional. They don't care.
No.
They don't care.
you could possibly imagine. And so its power is really dependent on its adherence to standards of integrity that gain respect and credibility. It has no armies, has no police force. People following those orders that it issues are because its wisdom and integrity have gained respect. This Supreme Court is different than any other we've seen.
Right.
And it's not just two members of the Supreme Court, because it is the institution as a whole that's responsible. And it is the Chief Justice of the court that is most responsible.
So we've added Roberts. We've got, now imagine, ladies and gentlemen, if they actually had the power to regulate the Supreme Court in any way, shape, or form. They have told you they're going to target Clarence Thomas, they're going to target Alito, and now they're going to target Roberts. And I guarantee you, Kavanaugh and Barrett would be on the list as well. Ketanji Brown, though, she can go to Beyonce concerts all she wants.
Or Sotomayor.
Or yeah, we'll get to that.
And so I asked Chief Justice Roberts, please endorse this legislation, not just for the sake of your legacy.
Hell no.
We know Chief Justice Roberts cares about his legacy.
He does.
Mm-hmm.
But for the sake of the court, this court is doing things, justices are committing errors of extraordinary misjudgment.
In your opinion.
Not to mention corrupt taking of gifts and trips and all the rest that are.
I'd be interested to know exactly how many trips and gifts he's received under the table with his wife as a lobbyist.
Oh, you're talking about Durbin.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Well, or Durbin, and then
I don't know what his wife.
Anyone who would lie about going to Vietnam is not a trustworthy individual. You
Very
know
true.
There's some shade there. That's all I'm going to say.
To use my colleagues' words, blowing to smithereens the credibility and trust that this court needs. It needs it for its decisions to be followed and respected. what we're doing here is very simply saying to the court, you must have a code of conduct that's enforceable. We're not telling them what to do.
Yes, you are.
We're not telling them to decide a case in one way or another. We're not interfering with their docket. We're not in any way affecting the substantive decisions of the United States Supreme Court. It is simply how they conduct themselves as public officials, whether they take gifts, whether they go on trips paid by somebody else, whether they accept tuition grants. It's common sense. You don't need to be a law school graduate to understand it. In fact, this idea is more comprehensible and more impactful to the folks who go to work every day and nobody gives them college tuitions, nobody takes them on private jets to islands that cost thousands of dollars to reach.
Islands?
Islands?
Islands? That's an interesting. So I'm going to let you guys know something. I looked up who his wife is just because I was curious, right? Her name is Cynthia Malkin, right? She's 15 years younger. Her father is Peter Malkin. Peter Malkin is a wealthy real estate investor who made his riches by working closely with his father-in-law, Lawrence Ween, an attorney as well as a real estate investor. He's currently the chairman emeritus of Empire State Realty Trust, a company that owns buildings across New York City, including the Empire State Building.
Really?
She's a Harvard graduate. She's 15 years younger than him. They've been married for over 30 years. They have 4 children. She's quite wealthy. Though Blumenthal's net worth is an estimated $104 million, most of it can actually be attributed to Malkin. They are part owners of the Empire State Building, which is valued at $2.5 billion. To get an idea of just how rich they are, they own a $2.5 million home in Greenwich, Connecticut. That's 5,700 square feet with 13 rooms.
Wow.
What does she do? Malkin is currently on the boards of the Bob Woodruff Foundation, the Center for Reproductive Rights, and is a commissioner of the National Portrait Gallery for the Smithsonian Institute in Washington, D.C. She's also served on boards over the years, including the YWCA, Meals on Wheels, and the Research and Grants Committee of the Fund for Women and Girls. She works events that benefit Planned Parenthood and the Breast Cancer Alliance. So, once again, these people are talking about things that wives did. I think this guy wouldn't be where he is right now today.
Probably not, no.
To the ordinary American, the everyday American, this legislation not only makes sense.
No, it doesn't make sense. And to hear any, honestly, I'm just going to say this, to hear any of these entitled, rich morons talk about the average American infuriates me. Just mentioning average American. Dude, you have no idea what the average American is going through right now. Probably never did. No clue.
I think most people assume there already is legislation like the one we're debating today. So I'm not going to belabor the specific provisions of this bill. I believe that we're going to have to go farther. I think there ought to be an inspector general for the courts as a part of the judicial conference, just like there is in other government entities. I think.
What's that?
At least he's being honest in what he wants.
They want control. That's what it comes down to. They want control of the Supreme Court. That's bottom line.
There has to be court reform that casts light on the shadow docket. There are a series of reforms, and some are a lot more draconian in their scope. But
he admitted it. He perfectly encapsulated what they want. We want control over the Supreme Court. We're willing to put forward absolutely draconian measures to get it.
And someday they're
But-
gonna
Go ahead.
they're gonna try and get if they have the House majority and the Senate and the presidency. It's kind of
Oh, yeah.
scary.
Yeah, if that happens, we're doomed.
Uh-huh.
We are absolutely doomed. So we've got to fix things before that.
This act is simple in requiring disclosure rules for gifts, travel, and income that are at least as strict as those we comply with here in Congress, a code of ethics, recusal, and Alito and Thomas should have recused themselves long ago from decisions involving Donald Trump. This
Why?
Good question.
Yeah. Why? Because they're a Trump supporter? Well, then Ketanji needs to recuse herself from anything the Democrats propose. That's how ridiculous you get.
Uh-huh.
I mean, it gets into stupid territory. But, I mean, big shock from stolen valor here. I mean, come on.
comprehensive judicial ethics legislation is long overdue. And my biggest regret as I stand on the floor of the Senate today is
Lying about
that it
Vietnam.
is not bipartisan.
Of course, it's not bipartisan.
Yeah,
Because it
why
should
would it
be.
be? Because the GOP
I've argued 4
knows
cases in
they're
the
not.
United States Supreme Court. I've been a law clerk there. I have
Then you should
immense
know better.
respect, unshakable respect
No, you
for
don't.
the institution.
No, you don't.
The institution. I have reverence for what it reflects in America. And sadly, the court has inflicted wounds on itself that will be difficult, and my fear is impossible to repair. But this measure will at least begin that process. Thank you, and I yield the floor.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah.
see why I-
wow. And yeah, I see why you
Pick that?
picked that.
Uh-huh.
They tell you directly. These are just a tiny part of what we want to do. If you allow us to get that 1 foot in the door, we are going to crack down so hard on the Supreme Court, and we are going to control it. That's exactly what it comes down to. So we got a couple other things for you real quick. So let's see, where is it? Here it is. All right. So we were able to get an article that gives 5 revelations from Supreme Court justices' latest financial disclosures. So what do they keep talking about, right? They keep talking about, I don't know, an island and these trips. And obviously, over and over and over, Alito and Thomas. Alito and Thomas.
Yep.
Alito and Thomas. Those are the ones they want gone. But they can't get rid of them yet. So what are they going to do? Try to get them off the case. So let's talk about why, or I should say, what is in these disclosures. Okay. So 5 revelations. This is from The Hill. 5 revelations from Supreme Court justices' latest financial disclosures. So it says here, the latest financial disclosures of the fortunates of the Supreme Court justices were released Friday, revealing tidbits such as the justices' new rental property, hundreds of thousands of dollars in book royalties, and even gifted concert tickets from none other than Beyonce, the queen of BS. 8 of the 9 sitting justices' 2023 disclosures were made public, while Justice Samuel Alito received a 90-day extension. Though the justices have long filed the annual paperwork, recent years' disclosures have come under greater scrutiny as the justices face increasing criticism for their ethical standards. We just talked about that. But here are 5 revelations in the latest financial disclosures. Thomas amends disclosures to include Harlan Crow trips. Clarence Thomas's financial disclosure included an amendment to a filing made half a decade ago to include 2 trips paid for by billionaire Harlan Crow. The disclosure indicated that the 2 2019 trips were, quote, inadvertently admitted from the paperwork's reimbursement section when the filings for that year were submitted. After receiving guidance from his accountant and ethics counsel, Thomas reported the trips. Okay, so he took a couple of trips. Where'd he go? The first trip, reimbursed by Crow and his wife Kathy, occurred July 12th, 2019 in Bali, Indonesia. Thomas indicated that he was a guest of the couple and was reimbursed for food and lodging at a hotel. So they flew him out to Bali. He ate some food and stayed in a hotel. Okay, I mean, all right. I don't really know who Harlan Crow is and whether or not there were any cases. I don't think so.
I don't think there is.
ProPublica first reported on the trip to Indonesia, writing that Thomas and his wife Jenny vacationed with the Crows for 9 days of island hopping in a volcanic archipelago on a super yacht staffed by a coterie of attendants and a private chef. That sounds fun, dude. I'm not going to lie, that sounds fun. The cost of the trip would have exceeded $500,000 for the Thomases, according to ProPublica, but the bill was covered by Crow. It's hard to estimate how much it would have cost because they own the yacht, I assume.
I think so.
And I don't know if you're talking about like paying all the staff and I mean, I don't know. I'm not defending it, but it's hard to say. Days later, between July 18th and 21st, 2019, Thomas was a guest of Crow in Monte Rio, California, where food and lodging at a private club were provided. The trip is likely a reference to Bohemian Grove, an exclusive all-male retreat in California, which Thomas and Crow have both reportedly attended. Did you know he went to Bohemian Grove?
I did not. Did you know that? Okay.
Yeah. There's a lot about these justices, even the so-called good ones, that kind of turn the stomach a little bit. Last year, Thomas reported trips paid for by Crow for the first time after the trip spilled out into public view. The development also followed new guideline increasing requirements for when the justices must report trips. Justices reimbursed for 19 trips. The 8 justices detailed 19 trips they received reimbursement for last year, 11 of which were paid for by colleges and universities. Many of the trips were previously known. 3 of the justices taught overseas, the documents indicate, while more than half the court took domestic trips to law schools.
And that makes sense.
That makes perfect sense. In July, Justice Neil Gorsuch taught at a national security program hosted in Portugal by George Mason University's law school. Justices Brett Kavanaugh and Amy Coney Barrett both traveled to London to teach at a University of Notre Dame Law School seminar last spring. 8 of the trips were reimbursed by groups other than colleges. Those include when Justice Sonia Sotomayor traveled to Los Angeles to present an award named after the late Justice Bader Ginsburg to actor and singer Barbara Streisand. Yeah, because that's what our tax money should go towards, right? It's not tax money, though, because they reimbursed it, right? But still. Ugh. Justice Ketanji Brown Jackson traveled to the 16th Street Baptist Church last September to speak at an event marking the 60th anniversary of a bombing there that killed 4 Black girls. At the event, Jackson warned that discomfort cannot prevent the teaching of Black history. Okay. And Gorsuch reported reimbursement from the Federalist Society for an additional program in London. 4 justices rake in book royalties. That's where the real money is, the book deals. The Obamas and many, many others suddenly get these book deals with tons of money, man. It makes you wonder where that comes from, doesn't it? 4 justices on the nation's highest court earned copious amounts of cash on royalties for their books. Jackson took in the most. Look at that. They didn't even mention her. Earning,
because she's on their side.
make sure I get this right, $893,750 from Penguin Random House for what appears to be an advance for her memoir, which comes out in September. She got almost $1 million for an advance on a book. Kavanaugh reported earning $340,000 in book royalties from the Javelin Group and Regnery Publishing for a book that's not yet published. Axios first reported Thursday that the justice is writing a legal memoir that will span his contentious 2018 confirmation to the 2022 plot to kill him. The book, not yet titled, is slated for release in 2025 or 2026, according to the outlet. Again, $340,000 he got for a book that isn't even written yet.
No.
Sotomayor raked in 2 book royalty payments from Penguin Random House, that name again, in 2023, totaling more than $86,000. Sotomayor has published 5 books with Penguin Random House, 3 of which are children's books that were also translated into Spanish. You know, I seem to remember someone else writing children's books and getting a whole bunch of money for it, and then they found those books in warehouses that they never got sold. They just paid an individual for these books. Yeah. Who is it?
I'm not sure who you're referring to.
I don't remember actually the individual, but I do remember that happening. If you guys know who I'm talking about, leave it in the comments.
Let me think a little bit.
Her other 2 books were also translated by the publishing house's Spanish language arm. She also reported receiving $1,879 for a voice performance in Alma's Way, an animated show that aired on PBS Kids. And Gorsuch reported book royalty income from 2 publishers, $250,000 from HarperCollins and about $312 from Princeton University Press. Gorsuch's book overruled The Human Toll of Too Much Law, written with one of his former clerks, Janie Nitze, is set to be released in August. The Justice's 2009 book, The Future of Assisted Suicide and Euthanasia, was released with Princeton's publishing house.
Never heard that before.
Beyonce gifted Jackson concert tickets. Beyonce gifted 4 free concert tickets to Jackson last year, Jackson's disclosure form shows. The document does not specify which concert the tickets were for, but Beyonce was on her Renaissance World Tour for much of last year, including a stop just outside Washington, D.C. Yeah, did you see it? Did you go?
No. I would never go.
I would never go to a Beyonce concert.
Ever.
The sheer volume of satanic, evil energy that's in that stuff.
Yeah,
is just
I don't like
nuts now.
Jay-Z or Beyonce.
Right. Jay-Z, like pretty much all of them. I mean, with very, very few exceptions, are all very disturbing imagery and like outright witchcraft on stage. I mean, just the document does not, the tickets valued at $3,711.84 were among the notable gifts the justices reported last year. So about $1,000 a ticket, I guess.
Yeah, a little bit less.
Yeah, that's a lot of money, dude, to go see somebody not sing.
About $950.
Yeah, look at you with the math. Jackson also reported $12,500 worth of artwork for her chambers at the Supreme Court building, gifted by 2 different artists and HU scholars. I don't know what that is.
I don't either.
Thomas, meanwhile, reported receiving photo albums from Terry and Barbara Giroux worth $2,000.
I've never heard of them.
Yeah, I don't know who they are, but it's going to tell us.
Okay.
Terry Giroux is the executive director of the Horatio Alger Association, a nonprofit scholarship organization that includes Thomas as a member. Okay, that makes sense. Thomas came under controversy last year after a New York Times investigation detailed how the group gave him access to a select group of wealthy conservative friends. So networking,
Uh-huh.
the thing that everyone does the thing you have to do when you're politically connected, and the Supreme Court is. That's really dumb. Sotomayor has a new rental property. Sotomayor's disclosure details for the first time a newly converted rental property located near Miami. The justice had apparently previously owned the residence, but justices only are required to disclose property used as investment. Interesting. So you can own all the property you want and not report it, but if you're using it as an investment, then it has to be reported. That's how it sounds. The new form states the property was a, quote, personal residence converted to rental in 2023. Sotomayor indicated that Zillow values the property between $100,001 and $250,000, also disclosing it brought in between $5,001 and $15,000 in rental income last year. That's not exorbitant, honestly. For close to Miami, 15,000. That's not that much. That's $10,000 a month. Yeah, I'm just saying that's not exorbitant. The justice also, again, at least right now, let's face it, right now, rent prices and home prices are freaking stupid. But the justice also, again, disclosed she rents out a unit in Manhattan that she still has a mortgage for. Sotomayor's not the only justice to have rental property, however. Chief Justice John Roberts again disclosed a 1/8 interest in his family's cottage in Ireland, as well as his ownership of a cottage in Maine. You ever think what it would be like to own a cottage?
It never crossed my mind.
You guys out there, if you got a cottage, let me know how it is to own a cottage, because most people just call them houses. But I guess if you're super rich, you call them cottages. I don't know.
Oh,
it's an interesting thing. Are the houses in Long Beach, are those houses or are they cottages on the lake?
That's a good question.
Yeah. What do you think? Let me know. Alito, who has not yet filed his 2023 disclosure, for years has disclosed a, quote, mineral interest in Oklahoma that brought in 6 figures in 2022. Ooh. Justice Elena Kagan, meanwhile, rents out a parking space in the nation's capital, according to the documents.
Oh,
okay. That's it.
Yep.
So, look, Congress should not, under any circumstances, be given any kind of control over the Supreme Court, whether that's for ethics, whether that's for oversight, whether that's for an inspector general, whether it's for anything.
Or have a lower court.
Right. Or have any other court control anything that the Supreme Court does.
Supreme Court's a unique thing that needs to be just left alone.
Right.
It's
right.
supposed to be independent.
It's supposed to be. I want to show, let's see if I can find it really quickly. I want to show you guys something. If not, okay, give me just 1 second. So there's some interesting, I'm going to call them theories about Alito.
Okay.
Okay. We're going to show you these real quick, and you guys have to make up your own mind because I don't know. I'm not the arbiter of truth. All I can do is present you with information that I run across. Let me show you. So this is an account on X/Twitter, Ariel at Proletario1. And sometimes he has some very interesting information. I cannot speak to the, truth or facts of these, but they are interesting. I will say he has not been community noted that I've seen. There was one, but it disappeared almost immediately. So it's just something to keep in mind. It says here, you all do know Samuel Alito was one of the primary reasons Joe Biden won Pennsylvania, right? It says Justice Samuel Alito ordered county elections officials in Pennsylvania to keep separate mail-in ballots that arrived after Election Day. The state's top elections official already had ordered those ballots to be kept apart. How many of you want to bet those ballots were for D. Trump? They were delayed on purpose, people. Everyone knows from decades of voting in Pennsylvania that votes are all counted on that day and not after. Aren't conservatives the ones constantly repeating that Jay Biden didn't win 80 million plus votes, right? That's why there are already 46 states that overturned the election results. You all do know D. Trump attempted to intervene on this case that the justices didn't act upon, right? Do you know he is now an active participant in election fraud? In 2020, the Supreme Court rejected an effort to overturn the results of the presidential election in Pennsylvania, signaling the high court would not go along with President Trump's unprecedented efforts to win another term despite a decisive defeat in the popular vote and electoral college. Are you starting to get it now? The Supreme Court said he was defeated. People, everyone knows this is a lie, period. Now do you see why he keeps having all these public gaffes regarding Donald Trump? Now do you see why he didn't want to recuse himself for many Trump cases? You all know that Samuel Alito is a Knights of Malta, right? Are you familiar with the Knights of Malta?
I am not.
We'll check them out in just a minute. Think about this. Justice Samuel Alito once told the late Senator Ted Kennedy that he respected Roe v. Wade's precedent. This is factual information that is documented. This is not my opinion. So wouldn't it make sense that the Satanic chose New Mexico for abortion rights? Here are a few reasons. It has about 3,300 members in the state, a robust base of potential need. New Mexico is also considered an abortion rights stronghold, lacking oppressive laws dictating gestational limits, age restrictions, waiting periods, and mandatory counseling. Here, unlike in neighboring states, Texas and Oklahoma, it was still legal for doctors and nurse practitioners to prescribe abortion pills remotely and have them mailed to patients for safe use at home. Anyone traveling to New Mexico from out of state can use a P.O. box or a friend or family member's address, even at hotels. Guess what? This was in honor of Samuel Alito's mother. This was not clickbait like some have suggested. Quote, Samuel Alito's mom's satanic abortion clinic. Does it sound like pure clickbait? Sure. But beneath the outlandish branding lies a sincere mission. The New Mexico-based telehealth practice, a legitimate medical entity run by an accredited clinical team, offers abortion care to patients within state lines. The staff prescribes abortion pills at $91 per set, a competitive price, up until the 11th week of pregnancy, and offers 24/7 phone access to licensed medical personnel to anyone in need. It's just that they're also Satanists, member of a religious organization called the Satanic Temple. But this is beside the point. Here is the New York Post article talking about how Justice Alito ordered Pennsylvania officials to set aside late arriving ballots. So, it says here, because this person said because there was litigation on whether or not they should be counted, so they kept them separate until a determination was made. It's not rocket science, people. Whoops. Reply. Did you read the official statement? Decisive defeat, decisive defeat, decisive defeat, decisive defeat. Newsflash, there was no decisive defeat. This was election fraud. You are basically stating Joe Biden won. You are basically stating that Donald Trump didn't try to fight this. You're basically stating Samuel Alito made the right decision. How when Joe Biden didn't legally win Pennsylvania? Forget litigation. They claimed votes that actually made it to the ballot box on time were late. You acting like those people who vote for decades in that state somehow forgot when to cast their votes. F out of here. Here's a picture that says the Supreme Court on Tuesday rejected an effort to overturn the results of the presidential election in Pennsylvania, signaling the high court would not go along with President Trump's unprecedented efforts to win another term despite a decisive defeat in the popular vote and Electoral College. That is a good point, because if that's what obviously Alito said, then it makes me wonder. Let's see here. There's another. Okay. Here's the other one that I want to show you real quick. It's not that long. And again, very, very interesting. Move you over here so you can see. Again, Ariel Proletario 1. Here we go. Samuel Alito is more than likely plotting to leak another decision like he did Roe v. Wade. Did got the nerve to do a Fox News interview telling the Wall Street Journal they are looking for the perpetrator. Not only that, he displayed the upside down flag at his home, and to stifle the backlash, he made his wife take the fall. This was the second time displaying an upside down flag in response to D. Trump. I didn't know about the first one, if this is accurate. He did this first in 2021 after D. Trump claims about the January 6th incident and election fraud. There is no doubt in my mind this man is up to no good, but you have so many plastic conservatives who think this man is infallible. Keep in mind, a reverend back in 2014 accused Samuel Alito for the Hobby Lobby leak, who spoke before the House Judiciary hearing. In the Burwell v. Hobby Lobby Stores, Inc. case from Gail and Donald Wright, a couple who had dined with Justice Samuel Alito and his wife. Alito, of course, denied that he or his wife shared any information about the opinion prior to. Gail Wright denied that she or her husband, now deceased, had learned the outcome from the Alitos. Of course she would if your life depends on it. Samuel Alito's mother, again with the abortion clinic, I don't know. I've read all kinds of stuff about this clinic, that it was specifically set up as a parody, basically a big middle finger to Samuel Alito. I can't speak to this, but I do find this interesting. It says, remember what I told you all about the Stop the Steal movement that Samuel Alito was in support of, which was run by CIA agents and P3s, P3DOs. One of them, Ali Alexander, worked on this campaign that was sponsored by Alex Jones. You familiar with the names?
Yeah.
Yes, you know all about this.
I've heard the name.
Okay.
But
I
I
recently
can't
learned
detest-
the name Ali Alexander not that long ago, but he's not, as far as I can tell, that whole thing is very murky. And let's just say I have come to what I once thought was a pure positive thing. I don't believe it is anymore. Which was nothing but a honeypot movement to set up American citizens to take the fall for an attempted coup that was blamed on Trump to charge him with insurrection so he could not run for office again. I do believe that part. I absolutely believe that January 6th was set up by intel agencies with various connections. We've seen the number of people in the crowd and the way that people were welcomed in, and there are way too many red flags there, put it that way. Now, the people involved, who knows? Here's a big list that he gives: Alex Jones, Samuel Alito, Michael Flynn, Mark Milley, Stanley McChrystal, Charles Flynn, Roger Stone, Patrick Byrne. All of these people were working in unison to get Donald Trump out of the way. Do not let anyone tell you otherwise, because I have proven this on many occasions. My info is supported by mainstream info that you cannot dismiss as alternative info that exists without any documentation. Samuel Alito knows a big decision is likely coming up, and he is looking for ways to sabotage it, which is why SCOTUS is being more careful this time, because they have a mole within their midst, and they probably figured out who it is. There's a CNN article that says Justice Samuel Alito absent from Supreme Court session for second day in a row. Again, I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know.
The veracity of the things I just read. What I do know is it makes you think and it makes you question, which I'm always in favor of.
Yeah.
Because worst case scenario, you start looking into this and you're like, let's see. And it reinforces your opinion that, yeah, Alito's a good guy. Well, that's not the worst case. That's, the worst case is you start looking into this and you're like, ooh, there's a lot of truth to this. Uh-oh. So what do you do?
Exactly.
What do you do? Yeah, there's not much that can be done.
Wait
but
for
I
them
will
to
say
retire.
this. What's that?
Wait for them to retire.
Yeah, and that's another good point. So these justices are appointed for life. Now, I'm like, oh, that's a terrible idea. However, I think one of the critical parts of that is once they're appointed, they're there. They cannot be influenced. They cannot be you can't tell them, well, if you do this, I'll make sure you're reappointed, right? Or any of that stuff. There's no political leverage there.
And that's what it was supposed to be.
That was the
They're
design.
supposed to be beyond politics.
Right. That was the design. So I'm going to get into a lot more interesting, let's call them conspiracy theories in the near future. I got a list that I'm working on. But ladies and gentlemen, I appreciate you spending the time with me. We do our best to break down this stuff and give you the critical moments from these arguments, because I can't. This is all. I want to let you guys know. This is all Shawn. The timestamps, all that. He deserves a big round of applause because
thank you.
I can't stomach watching all these Democrats talk that stuff they talk. Let's just say that. So, all right, ladies and gentlemen, I appreciate it, and we'll see you again very, very soon. Most nights at 7 p.m. and Wednesday mornings at 8 a.m. You can catch Coffee Break with me and my buddy Jim. Now, this Wednesday, probably going to have to move it because unfortunately he was involved in a motorcycle accident last week, and he has to go to physical therapy Wednesday. So we're going to see if we can get it on another day. But without further ado, God bless you, God bless Indiana, and God bless the United States of America. I hope you have a wonderful evening. Good night.
If you'd like to support the show, please visit our Patreon at patreon.com/Dion's Daily Dose. This has been Dion's Daily Dose, hosted by Dion Bergeron. Executive producers, Shawn Holgram and Michael Beebe. Copyright 2024. Dion's Daily Dose, all rights reserved.